Justice Amy Coney Barrett tried to make an example of Jasmine Crockett using authority to suppress pushback, but when the cameras stayed on and the truth spread fast, it was not Jasmine left to explain her choices. It was the judge herself, Jasmine. Crockett had handled pressure before, from intense committee sessions to national spotlights. She knew how to face tough moments. But this was different. It was a Monday morning when the envelope landed on her desk in D.C. A thick, formal-looking packet with a gold seal marked across the front at first. She assumed it was routine, perhaps another invite to speak on law or ethics, but as she flipped through the pages, her face grew serious. It was a subpoena, and not just any kind. She had been called to testify in a federal case involving possible misconduct within the House. The documents were vague, clearly on purpose, but one thing stood out. Who would oversee the hearing? Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Jasmine. Reread the name. Done. Since when did a Supreme Court justice lead a federal investigation against a sitting member of Congress? That was far from normal. Jasmine felt a tight knot form in her stomach. This was not just about giving testimony. This looked like a setup. She acted quickly, calling her legal advisor a former prosecutor known for spotting hidden motives. "They are reaching," he said plainly. "Subpoenaing you is not illegal, but the optics? Putting Barrett on this? They want to make someone an example, and your voice is loud enough to fit that plan." "I am not backing down," Jasmine said, pacing around her office. "They will hear me, and I am not walking in there quietly for anyone. You will not be alone," he assured her. "But stay composed, you know how they twist the story." That Wednesday, Jasmine flew out for the hearing. Reporters had already started gathering outside the courthouse. When she arrived, cameras followed every step she wore. A tailored navy pantsuit, her signature curls framing a focused face. She entered the courthouse with her head high and her nerves steady inside. The courtroom was colder than expected, silent and formal whispers echoing off the stone walls. She took her place at the witness table beside her legal team and waited. Then the doors opened. Amy Coney Barrett walked in, dressed in robes, face unreadable. Their eyes met for a moment, no words exchanged, but Jasmine caught it, a brief look of recognition, maybe even challenge. The room stood as Barrett took her seat. "We are here today to collect testimony relevant to case number 24, FR 225, Barrett began, voice firm and precise. "This is a federal proceeding. Any disorder, defiance, or break from rules will not be accepted." Jasmine sat still, hands neatly folded. Barrett's tone made it clear. This was not about truth. It was about control. As the hearing started, prosecutors began with what seemed like basic questions until the shift came. They moved into Jasmine's past statements, her stances on divisive legislation, even her tweets. "This has nothing to do with the matter at hand," Jasmine finally said, clearly annoyed. "I was called to speak on oversight, not on my political views." "The witness will remain in order," Barrett snapped. Jasmine leaned forward slightly. "With all due respect, I will not be used as political leverage in this room. If there is a charge, state it. If not, let us stop acting like this is justice." The room went still. Barrett paused, lips tight. "Let the record show the witness has been cautioned." But Jasmine did not flinch. She could see what was coming and had no plans to walk away outside. The noise was growing. Social media was already blowing up. A clip of Jasmine speaking up against Barrett had gone viral. In minutes, people were watching, and Jasmine realized this was bigger than her. This was just the start. By day 2 of the hearing, the gravity of the situation had fully settled. Jasmine Crockett reached the courthouse before the sun rose, avoiding the media chaos that had only intensified since day 1. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages of encouragement, concern, and questions came flooding in, but she ignored them. This was not about public reaction. This was about what waited behind those tall courtroom doors inside. The atmosphere was more tense, sharper. Everyone sensed it. Barrett sat high behind the bench, face blank, robe, neat posture firm. She had not made any public remarks since yesterday's clash, but she did not need to. Her silence said enough. Jasmine took her seat, steady but aware. Her attorney leaned in and said quietly, "They are going to provoke you today. Do not take the bait." "I won't," she replied, "but I am not going to tiptoe either." The hearing picked back up. Prosecutors moved fast. Too fast. They launched into a fresh set of questions, completely unrelated to the main issue of the case. Jasmine's past activism, local protests she had joined, even fundraising events. This was not a hearing. It was more like cross-examination, Congresswoman. Crockett, tone of the prosecutor, said, holding up a printed copy of a speech she gave the previous year. Do you still believe the justice system is driven by politics? I said it then, and I will say it again, Jasmine replied. Parts of it air, and this courtroom is showing exactly that. Barrett hit the bench sharply with her gavel. You will respond to questions directly, without added remarks. I am answering directly. You just dislike the answer, Jasmine replied, her voice calm. The room shifted slightly, not loud or chaotic, but quiet. Whispers moved through the audience. The bailiff shot a warning look toward the crowd. Barrett met Jasmine's eyes. If you keep interrupting, I will find you in contempt, Jasmine breathed slowly through her nose. This was not about facts. It was about authority. Who would keep control, and she understood it was far from over. The next part crossed a line. The prosecutors brought up an exhibit, a social media post Jasmine had liked. Years ago, completely out of context, it criticized a ruling Barrett had made. Before she joined the Supreme Court, they displayed it on the courtroom screen, like it was sensitive information. Jasmine stared in disbelief. You are really showing something. I liked online years before this even happened. The post reflects your thinking, the prosecutor replied. Your bias against this court. I am not the one on trial. She said, but if I were, you would still be failing to prove anything. Barrett reacted quickly this time. Congresswoman Crockett, this is your final warning for disrupting, for responding, because those are two different things, and you know that. Barrett's jaw tensed. She reached for her gavel, then paused, seemed to think for a moment, then turned to the prosecutor. Go ahead with your next question. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur, questions designed to pressure, answers meant to hold the line. But Jasmine stayed steady. She never raised her voice or walked out, just stayed present, clear, composed. But everyone in that room knew this was far from finished. Barrett represented more than a judge now. Crockett had become a symbol too, and they were now set on a path that would not be quiet as. The session ended. Jasmine stood to go, but before she moved even 2 steps, Barrett spoke again. Congresswoman Crockett. A moment. Jasmine turned, one brow raised. You will return tomorrow, and I strongly advise you to rethink your tone. This court does not support theatrics. Jasmine nodded once. Neither do the people watching at home. She left the courtroom without saying another word. Outside, the crowd had tripled, microphones pointed toward her. Supporters held signs. Some showed her photo. Others read messages like, let her speak. Jasmine did not stop for them. She did not need to. This was not about making noise for attention. It was about getting through the storm without breaking, and the storm was only beginning on day 3. The hearing felt less like a courtroom session and more like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Jasmine Crockett felt it. So did her legal team, and clearly, so did Judge Barrett. Tension filled the courthouse as Jasmine arrived. The energy was heavy, like the silence right before thunder. Even the guards stood taller, more alert. The prosecutors looked sharper, more eager. They were no longer just questioning Jasmine. They were out to bring her down. Judge Barrett did not acknowledge her when she walked in, not even a glance. She shifted some papers and began the session. This court is ready to continue the hearings, she said calmly. The witness will return. To the stand Jasmine stood and walked with purpose to the front. The sound of her heels echoed through the room, slow and clear. She was not here to perform, and she was not here to fold. The prosecutor stood. Let's go back to the issue of public trust. Congresswoman Jasmine gave a nod. Not shaken. You have openly questioned whether the courts are fair. In your words, you claimed, there are those in power who hide behind rules when truth threatens them. Were you referring to this court? No, Jasmine said, but it appears to fit. Soft gasps came from the audience. The prosecutor glanced at Barrett, who showed no change in expression. Yet, Congresswoman, the prosecutor continued, pushing forward, would you admit that your refusal to give direct answers, your sharp tone, and your challenge to this court's authority show a clear disrespect for due process? Jasmine leaned in slightly. What I will not do is sit here and pretend this is fair. This is not about justice. It is about appearances. Barrett's voice cut in. That is enough. Jasmine turned her attention to her, still respectful. It is not, because as we sit here in this room, being told what we can and cannot say, There are real people out there watching closely, seeing exactly what this system does to those it cannot control. Barrett's tone turned firm. Final Congresswoman Crockett, this is your last disruption. If you speak again without permission, I will use my authority and hold you in contempt. I suggest you choose your next words carefully. That was the moment everything shifted. Jasmine's attorney gently touched her arm, trying to ease the tension, but she calmly moved his hand away. I was taught to speak up when things are wrong, she said. Not just when it is easy, not just when it is allowed, but when it counts. The room fell into a heavy silence. Judge Barrett looked straight at her and made her next decision without pause. This court finds the witness in contempt, she said. Take her out. A wave of surprise passed through the room. You are serious? Jasmine asked, slowly rising. You have repeatedly ignored this court's authority. No, Jasmine said. I have spoken against its misuse, and I will do it again if truth is at stake. The bailiff stepped forward, briefly unsure. Jasmine did not resist. She simply looked at Barrett and said, You will regret this, not as a threat, but as a promise. Because outside this courtroom, something had begun. Videos of the incident were already going. Viral lawmakers were reacting. Legal experts were questioning the legality of it all. People who had never heard of Jasmine before were now sharing her image, with captions like brave and targeted. And every moment was under public watch as Jasmine was led out. She kept her head up, shoulders firm, eyes forward, even as cameras flashed and reporters called her name, because somewhere inside, she knew this was not her loss. This was the start of a backlash. No robe could quiet outside. The air felt changed, tense, electric. Jasmine Crockett had not even reached the transport vehicle before reporters started shouting, Congresswoman, did you expect to be taken in today? Do you believe Justice Barrett treated you fairly? Is this political punishment? She said nothing. Not yet. She kept walking. Inside, her legal team was already reacting. They had not expected Barrett would actually have her removed. Taking out an elected member of Congress on such shaky grounds was more than unusual. It was explosive. By the time Jasmine was officially booked for contempt, social media was exploding. The moment she said, You will regret, this was already posted 1,000 different times, with 1,000 different takes. But not everyone reacted the same. Some were outraged, others accused her of making a scene. But more thoughtful voice asked something else entirely. Why was this happening? In the first place? Back in the courthouse, things were not going smoothly for Barrett. Within hours, 2 retired federal judges issued public comments, raising concern about a Supreme Court justice leading such a politically tense hearing and taking such visible action. One headline read, Is Justice Barrett stepping over constitutional limits? That night, while Jasmine sat in a holding room, waiting on a legal update, her team filed an emergency motion claiming overreach, lack of fairness, and misuse of judicial power. The motion was clear. This is not about courtroom behavior. This is about silencing criticism, about using the highest bench to intimidate an elected official who refused to back down. And then something unexpected happened. Calls started pouring into congressional offices. Regular people speaking up in support. Even a few lawmakers from the other side quietly reached out, showing private backing. Then came the video. A court stenographer leaked an extended clip of the hearing anonymously. No cuts, no edits. It showed Jasmine's tone, her exact words. And, crucially, the moment Barrett found her in contempt without spin it, painted a version far calmer than the official story claimed. By the next morning, the video had millions of views. As the sun came up, Jasmine was released on her own word, pending the court's review of the contempt charge. Her lawyer met her at the door. At first, he said nothing. He simply nodded as they walked to the car, then finally said, They pushed it too far. Jasmine gave a tired but steady smile. Let's make sure that counts. That same afternoon, her legal team filed a motion to dismiss the contempt ruling. The filing went beyond technical issues. It questioned the fairness of the entire process and called for Barrett to step aside from the case, pointing to bias, overreach, and conflict. This was no longer about legal procedure. It had turned into a political shockwave. As the motion moved through the system, Barrett stayed quiet. No press briefings, no remarks, no responses, but people close to the court began to murmur. Some clerks felt uneasy about how quickly things had escalated. Others quietly questioned her choices. Barrett's silence was not confidence. It was calculated, but to Jasmine and her team it felt like confirmation. This was never about following procedure. It was about control, about putting her in her place. But that approach had backfired. What started as an attempt to punish and shame gave Jasmine something much stronger: national attention, moral ground, and growing support. From people who understood what really happened. By the week's end, protesters gathered outside the courthouse, not huge in number but loud enough to make the news signs read, "Let her speak. Truth should not be silenced by power. This is resistance." The contempt charge might have been intended to shut things down instead. It opened a door that could not be shut. Jasmine Crockett did not speak publicly for 2 full days. After her release, not a post, not a comment, complete silence. But it was not doubt, it was careful planning. In the background, her lawyers worked. Around the clock, not just on a defense but on a broader case, challenging what happened in that courtroom and why outside. The country did not stay quiet. Major news shows aired the story in prime time. Some anchors called it a political crisis. Others saw it as a cultural turning point. What made it stick this time was the raw video-uncut courtroom footage. No yelling, no scenes. Just a black congresswoman, clearly standing her ground, and a Supreme Court justice cutting her off with the threat of jail. That image unsettled many. It was not something you could twist. The reaction was not just political, it was deeply personal. Civil rights lawyers spoke up online, one after another, calling Barrett's actions unconstitutional. Law professors across the nation published quick analyses overnight, most making the same argument. Contempt of court is not meant to silence speech, it exists to keep order, and Crockett had not caused any disorders. He spoke up, and power pushed back. Even members of Congress, who normally stayed out of these matters, felt compelled to respond. More than 30 lawmakers signed a joint letter criticizing the contempt decision, saying it marked a disturbing decline in respect for elected voices, especially those challenging old power structures. Quietly, Jasmine's lawyers were planning something bigger than just clearing her record. They were putting together a formal challenge to Barrett's authority in the matter, submitting a request to the Judicial Conference to examine her actions carefully, and they were preparing expert testimony in case a review hearing was scheduled. As for Jasmine, she watched, waited, letting the pressure build. Then came the moment. At 11:07 a.m. on Monday, she stepped outside the courthouse. Her legal team behind her cameras flashed constantly. Reporters pushed forward. She wore all white, intentional, neat, steady. She walked to the microphone and paused before starting. "I want to thank everyone who has reached out over these past few days," she said, "not because it has been easy, but because it has been necessary." What happened in that courtroom was not just about. It was about power and what happens when someone refuses to shrink. She looked straight into the cameras. "I was held in contempt, not because I broke a law, but because I refused to break myself to fit a system that punishes people who look like me for, Speaking boldly, I came to testify, ready to tell the truth, but I was silenced." She paused again. "Judge Barrett may hold the bench, but she does not have the final word." The crowd cheered, reporters shouted questions, but she said nothing more. She stepped back, nodded to her lawyer, and left. That video clip reached over 15 million views in a single day. That evening, the Department of Justice released a short notice. "We are aware of the recent events involving Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. We will review the conduct and judicial management of this issue." That statement was not standard, and it was not meaningless. It meant this was no longer just a public story. It had entered official channels. Inside the court, Barrett stayed quiet, but legal circles were filled with whispers. Rumors spread about conversations among Supreme Court aides, and a quiet discomfort over Barrett's continued role in the matter. By midweek, Crockett's legal team submitted their final request, an urgent appeal to cancel the contempt ruling, along with a formal motion to have Barrett removed from the case due to demonstrated bias and personal conflict. The filing ended with a powerful line: "This court was not used to serve justice but to punish speech, and that cannot be allowed." And now it was up to the system that claimed to defend freedom to show That it still could, the courtroom was empty. The morning the decision was announced, Jasmine was not there. Neither was Judge Barrett. Instead, a group of senior federal judges quietly reviewed the emergency requests. No reporters, no spotlight, just a private review of what had taken place, and the rules broken to make it happen. The ruling came just before noon. It was fast, clear, and critical. The contempt ruling against Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was completely overturned. The court found that removing her from the hearing was not based in law, and that her words, though strong, did not meet the legal standard for disruption, worthy of contempt. More importantly, the panel concluded that silencing her damaged the principle of fair judging and expressed serious concern about Barrett's conduct. For the first time, the system that had tried to silence Jasmine had to admit its own misuse of power. The story spread quickly across the nation by 1 p.m. Jasmine's name was trending everywhere. A growing number of lawmakers from both sides began calling for deeper review of the larger case. Barrett had been presiding over quiet concerns became public as senators on the Judiciary Committee demanded clarity on how a Supreme Court justice came to lead a high-profile hearing with no clear legal basis behind the scenes. Cracks began to show. Barrett's longtime supporters in law circles who had praised her control and balance started going quiet. Some made cautious statements, creating distance. Others stayed silent. One former judge speaking off the record put it simply, Barrett made it personal, and when judges take things personally, they lose their authority. If not by law, then by trust. Jasmine, on her end, did not celebrate publicly. She gave a short press briefing, not at the courthouse this time, but in a small community center, in the area where she once worked as a public defender. She stood in front of a small crowd. No written remarks, no screen to read. "From this is not about me," she said. "It is about what happens when truth is seen as a threat, when speaking honestly is treated like stepping out of line." She looked down briefly, choosing her next words carefully. "Back in law school, I was taught that contempt of court was meant to keep order, not defend status, not protect pride, and definitely not to ease the comfort of those in power. But this week showed us something else, something dangerous that even at the top rules can bend. When fear takes over, fear of progress, fear of pushback, fear of people like me." The room stayed quiet listening. "But fear does not win," she said. "It reacts, it lashes out, and it always goes too far." Barrett stayed hidden, no press briefings, no public word. Legal experts believed she was told to stay quiet and wait for things to calm down. But this was not just another media story. It had turned into something larger in legal spaces. Debates grew. Should a sitting Supreme Court justice be part of hearings with political weight? Should there be stronger ethics rules? Could Congress step in and oversee? The push was no longer just behind Jasmine. It was with all those who had ever been told they were too direct, too bold, or too much just for speaking plainly. The story kept growing, reaching students, organizers, advocates, and even people who never cared for courtrooms before. A week later, a subcommittee in Congress launched a formal review into how Barrett acted during the hearing. The message was clear: this would not fade away, and for Jasmine Crockett it was never about winning a case, it was about standing firm. When silence was the easier choice, because sometimes laws do not protect truth until someone forces them. Toby refusing to stay quiet. It was raining when Jasmine Crockett returned to the courthouse. Steps not as a witness, not as someone on trial, but as someone who stood tall. The skies were dull with rain coming steady, as if the city itself had paused to listen. Journalists gathered under umbrellas. Supporters stood nearby, holding signs made by hand, not focused on party or politics, but on what Jasmine now meant to them. She stood beneath the stone awning, water trickling down the wall behind her, and for the first time since that day, she arrived alone. No lawyers at her side, no one whispering cues. She came with purpose. "I have spent the past few weeks thinking about silence." She began, her tone calm and sure. The rain tapped softly on her mic about how silence is used against people, how it is expected, asked for, and enforced, especially when someone like me chooses not to sit still and agree. She paused. "This did not happen because I broke a rule. It happened because I did not break." Her voice stayed. Even the weight came not from shouting but from how steady she was. She was not upset, she was clear. what happened in that room was not only about legal lines, it was a message meant for more than me. It warned anyone who dares to speak honestly in places not built for them. But the truth is, this system does not choose when we speak. We do. A few reporters tried to cut. She raised her hand slightly. I will take questions in a moment, but let me finish this first. She glanced at the courthouse behind her. There is a real cost to not backing down, a serious one. It might mean bad press or being held in contempt, or headlines meant to twist your side before it's told. But that price is small compared to staying silent. I will not pay that cost. I never will. Applause followed from under umbrellas. Not loud or wild, but soft and real, like people knew this meant something. She kept going. What I went through was not just courtroom rules. It was about who has the right to speak without being punished. And that right should never depend on skin color, gender, or politics. Jasmine looked at the people there, her voice gentle. I have heard from so many across the country, teachers, students, nurses, workers in places I will never go, telling me they saw something in my story that reminded them of when they were told to sit down, be quiet, just go along. And to every one of them, I see you, I hear you, and I hope you never stay quiet either. She paused, again before stepping back. That could have been the end, but she added softly, almost like a whisper to the cameras, they wanted me to regret telling the truth, but the only thing I regret is that so many still feel they cannot. The last shot zoomed out as Jasmine stepped down the courthouse stairs, not rushed, not hiding, just walking, her words still ringing out. I will not be silenced, and you should not be either. By that night, clips of her speech were edited into videos, reactions, and reports spreading. Worldwide, the moment had shifted beyond court debates. It had become a signal. Jasmine walked into that building to testify, but walked out as a sign to those who believed silencing someone could erase their message. It did not. It made it louder. If this story spoke to you, if you believe power must answer for its actions, whoever holds it, hit subscribe. We are sharing the stories others avoid, and this is just the start.